You hear it first in the quiet, the low hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the clock on the wall, the way your own breath sounds different when no one else is listening. There is a particular quality to the air when you are alone in your home, a thickness that is not emptiness, but presence, not loneliness, peace. They call it antisocial. They wonder why you turn down invitations, why you choose your couch over the crowded bar, why your Friday night looks like tea and a book instead of lights and noise. They worry. They assume something is wrong, that you are hiding, that you are afraid of life. But what if they have it backwards? What if staying home is not retreat but return, not withdrawal but arrival? What if the quiet you seek is not absence, but the most honest form of presence you know? This is not a defense of isolation. This is a reframing of sanctuary. Because for some of us, the highly sensitive, the deep processors, the ones who feel the world at high volume, home is not where we hide from life. It is where we remember who we are underneath the performance. It is where the nervous system stops bracing and starts breathing. It is where the mask dissolves at the door and the real work begins. The work of integration, of emotional archaeology, of becoming whole enough to offer the world something true instead of something tolerable. The culture worships visibility. It equates worth with how often you are seen, how loudly you are heard, how many rooms you fill with your presence. But there is another way to live. There is power in the pause. There is intelligence in knowing when to step back, when to close the door, when to let the world spin without you for a while, so you can remember how you spin on your own axis. This is the story of that choice, the choice to stay, the choice to be still, the choice to build a life that does not require constant witness to justify its worth. Perhaps it started early. Perhaps you were the child who needed to leave the birthday party halfway through, not because you weren't having fun, but because the fun had begun to hurt. Too many voices layering over one another. Too much sugar brightness and shrieking laughter. The fluorescent lights in the classroom that made your head feel full of bees. The crowded hallway, between classes where bodies pressed too close, and every conversation bled into the next, until you couldn't tell which thoughts were yours, and which had been absorbed through your skin. You learned quickly that the world was loud, in ways other people didn't seem to notice. They moved through it easily, these others, collecting stimulation like prizes. They wanted more plans, more people, more noise, more light. And you wanted less. Not because you were broken, because you were paying attention. So you built an inner world. You had to. It was the only place where the volume was bearable, where you could hear yourself think, where your nervous system could stop scanning for threats and settle into something like rest. You became fluent in solitude before you had language for it. You discovered that your bedroom was not a prison, but a laboratory, that your imagination was not escapism, but a kind of sense-making. A way of translating the overwhelming chaos of out there into something coherent in here. This is not pathology. This is architecture. You were not avoiding life. You were creating the conditions under which you could actually live it. The sensitive child grows into the adult who understands something fundamental. That sanctuary is not optional. It is structural. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Home became your base camp, the place you returned to in order to prepare, to rebuild, to make sense of what you had gathered from the world. Not a hiding place, a homecoming. There is science beneath the instinct. The term is high sensitivity, though the label matters less than the lived reality. A nervous system calibrated to detect subtlety. You process more. You notice shifts in tone, micro-expressions, the emotional temperature of a room. You register what others filter out. The hum of overhead lights, the texture of fabric against skin, the faint tension in someone's voice that signals something unsaid. This is not weakness. This is a different bandwidth. But bandwidth has a cost. The brain that processes deeply fatigues differently. It reaches capacity sooner. What looks like 4 hours of casual socializing to someone else might register in your system as 4 hours of high alert data collection, emotional translation, and self-monitoring. By the time you leave the gathering, your cortisol has been quietly climbing. Your adrenals have been working overtime. You are not tired from doing nothing. You are tired from doing everything at once. So when you come home and close the door behind you, what happens is not avoidance. It is regulation. The nervous system recognizes safety. The threat detection system powers down. The muscles you did not realize you were clenching begin to soften. You are not shutting the world out. You are letting yourself back in. This is the mask coming off. Out there, you perform a version of yourself that can navigate the social script. Pleasant, engaged, appropriately responsive. It is not false, but it is effortful. It is translation work. At home, you stop translating. You stop holding your face in the right expression. Stop modulating your energy to match the room. Stop pretending that small talk feels natural when your mind wants to speak in paragraphs, or not at all. The quiet is not emptiness. It is the sound of your system recalibrating. It is your parasympathetic nervous system finally getting a word in. It is balance, not retreat. Balance. The culture has taught you to be suspicious of your own need for stillness. It has built an entire value system around extroversion, around the person who gains energy from the crowd, who thinks out loud, who finds clarity in motion and meaning in visibility. That person is celebrated. That person is normal. That person is winning. And if you are not that person, the message is clear. Fix yourself. Push through. Get out more. Say yes. Show up. Be seen. The quiet life is treated as a life half-lived, a failure of courage, a slow resignation. Productivity culture doubles down on the message. Rest is laziness. Solitude is loneliness. Staying home is stagnation. If you are not constantly visible, constantly producing, constantly available, you are falling behind. But this is not truth. This is bias. This is a cultural preference, masquerading as universal law. There is another lineage, older and quieter, that understood what we have forgotten. That depth requires withdrawal. That insight grows in silence. That the soul does some of its most important work when the world is not watching. Go within or go without, the mystic said, not as punishment, as instruction. Stillness is not the absence of power. It is a different form of power. The power to listen instead of perform. The power to feel fully instead of react quickly. The power to choose presence over productivity, depth over display, alignment over applause. This is not passivity. This is discernment. This is knowing that not every invitation deserves a yes, that not every noise deserves your attention, that not every moment requires your participation. The extroverted world will call this antisocial. Let it. You are not antisocial. You are selectively social. You are pro-depth. You are conserving your energy for connections that matter, for work that requires your full presence, for the kind of intimacy that cannot happen in crowds. There is quiet power in the pause. There is courage in closing the door. Intentional solitude is where the real thinking happens. Not the reactive thinking, the social thinking, the performance thinking, but the kind of thought that moves slowly, that follows a thread all the way down, that discovers connections no conversation could have rushed you toward. This is where creativity lives, in the uninterrupted stretch of time when your mind is allowed to wander without destination, without agenda, without the need to articulate itself before it is ready. The research backs this. Studies on insight and problem solving show that breakthroughs rarely happen in the noise. They happen in the shower, on the walk, in the moment of staring out the window, when you are supposed to be doing something else. The brain needs white space. It needs permission to defragment, to sort, to make meaning from the raw material it has been collecting. Solitude is not the absence of input. It is the presence of processing. You have felt this. The way an idea that eluded you all week suddenly arrives whole and clear when you are alone with your coffee on a Saturday morning. The way a problem untangles itself when you stop trying to solve it and just sit with it in the quiet. The way your own feelings become legible only after you have had time away from the people and places that generated them. Solitude is the studio. It is where you take the scattered fragments of experience and arrange them into something coherent. This is emotional intelligence in real time. Out in the world, you absorb other people's moods, their needs, their unspoken expectations. You adapt, you accommodate. But emotional intelligence is not just absorption. It is integration. It is the capacity to feel your own feelings, to name them, to understand what they are trying to tell you. And that work requires space. It requires the kind of silence where a buried emotion can surface without interruption, where you can sit with discomfort long enough to learn what it means. The shallow life is the one that never pauses long enough to process. The deep life knows. Clarity comes in the quiet. But the guilt arrives anyway, doesn't it? You see the photos, the group dinners, the weekend trips, the concerts and gallery openings, and spontaneous adventures. Everyone else seems to be collecting experiences like currency, building highlight reels that glow with proof of a life well lived. And you are home. Again, with your tea and your book and your same four walls. The fear whispers, you are missing out. You are wasting your youth. You are choosing safety over living. This is the distortion. Social media has weaponized comparison, turned every quiet evening into evidence of inadequacy. But what you are seeing is not reality. It is performance. It is the curated 5%, the edited moment, the smile that lasted just long enough for the camera. You are not seeing the exhaustion that follows, the hangover, the social fatigue, the drive home in silence, wondering why it didn't feel as good as it looked. You are not seeing the people who went out because they felt obligated, who said yes because they were afraid of the judgment that comes with saying no. You are comparing your inner experience to someone else's outer presentation, and you are losing a game that was rigged from the start. Here is the reframe. Peace is a valid aim. Contentment is not consolation for a life unlived. It is the life. The monks knew this. The contemplatives, the artists, the deep thinkers across centuries. They understood that some richness only reveals itself in solitude, that some truths only arrive in stillness. They were not hiding in their cells and studios and quiet rooms. They were working, they were listening, they were cultivating the inner ground from which everything meaningful grows. You do not owe the world constant availability. You do not owe anyone an explanation for preferring your own company. The life that looks small from the outside may be vast on the inside, and only you know which one is true. Release the guilt. It is not yours to carry. It was handed to you by a culture that profits from your restlessness, that needs you anxious and comparing, and perpetually unsatisfied. You are not failing. You are choosing differently. Your body knows the difference. It knows the difference between the restaurant where you are performing engagement and the living room where you can finally exhale. It knows the difference between the meeting where you are holding your posture just so and the couch where your shoulders drop 2 inches. The nervous system is not fooled by your good attitude. It is tracking threat level at a level below conscious thought, and it is keeping score. In low-threat environments, quiet rooms, familiar spaces, solitude, cortisol drops. The stress hormone that has been humming in your bloodstream all day finally begins to drain. Heart rate variability improves, a sign that your system is shifting out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. Blood flow returns to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reflection, insight, and emotional regulation. This is not metaphor. This is measurable physiology. Safety is not just a feeling. It is a biological state. And in that state, something unexpected happens. The emotions you have been outrunning all week finally catch up. Not because home makes you sad, but because home makes you safe enough to feel. Out there, you have to keep moving. You have to stay functional, composed, adequate to the demands of the moment. There is no time to process grief or frustration, or the low-grade dread that has been shadowing you for months. So you compress it, you table it, you promise yourself you will deal with it later. Later is now. Later is the moment you walk through your door, and the tears come for no clear reason, or the exhaustion hits like a wave, or the anxiety you have been white-knuckling through suddenly demands your full attention. This is not breakdown. This is thaw. The system finally feels safe enough to release what it has been holding. This is healing. This is the body trusting you enough to stop pretending. Home is where the armor comes off, and underneath the armor is everything you have been carrying. Let it surface, let it move through. This is not weakness. This is the physiology of repair. The objects matter. The teacup you always use, the specific chair by the window, the lamp that casts warm light instead of harsh white. These are not just preferences. They are cues. Your nervous system learns to associate certain stimuli with certain states, and over time, the ritual becomes the signal. The act of lighting the candle tells your body, we are safe now. The sound of water boiling for tea says, we are slowing down. The texture of the soft blanket against your skin whispers, you can rest here. This is environment as medicine. You are not decorating. You are designing the conditions for regulation. Every choice you make about your space, is a choice about your inner state. The clutter that overwhelms your eye overwhelms your mind. The harsh lighting that makes you squint keeps your system on alert. The chaos you walk into every evening trains your body to brace instead of release. But the space that is intentional, that is simplified, that reflects care, that space becomes a mirror. It shows you what you are worth. It shows you that your comfort matters, that your needs are legitimate, that you deserve an environment calibrated to your specific nervous system. The rituals do not have to be elaborate. They just have to be yours. The same morning routine, the evening walk around the block before you settle in, the way you arrange the pillows, the playlist you return to, the 5 minutes you spend staring out the window at nothing in particular. These are not procrastination. These are anchors. They are the breadcrumbs you leave for yourself, the pathway back to center. When the world has pulled you too far out, home is not passive. It is practice. Every time you honor the small ceremony of return, shoes off at the door, kettle on, breath deepening, you are teaching your system that it is allowed to soften. You are building trust with yourself. You are saying, I will create the conditions you need. I will not abandon you to chaos. I will bring you back, here, again and again, until you remember that peace is possible. The space becomes you, and you become the space. Sanctuary is not found. It is built, one intentional choice at a time. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from feeling too much of what is not yours. You walk into a room, and you know immediately that someone is angry, even though they are smiling. You absorb the tension in a conversation that everyone else seems to miss. You leave a gathering, carrying the weight of a dozen unspoken emotions, none of which belong to you, but all of which have soaked into your system like second-hand smoke. This is empath fatigue, and it is real, not mystical, not overdramatic, real. The mirror neurons in your brain are working overtime. Your system is constantly reading, translating, responding to the emotional data in your environment. You are not imagining the heaviness. You are metabolizing it, and metabolizing the emotions of others. On top of your own is labor, invisible labor, unpaid labor, the kind that leaves you depleted in ways you cannot explain to people who do not live inside this particular wiring. So when you come home, what you need is decompression, not distraction. Decompression, the emotional equivalent of a diver, rising slowly to avoid the bends. You need time to separate what is yours from what you absorbed. You need silence to stop translating everyone else's frequency and remember your own. You need solitude to shed the emotional residue that clings to you like dust, to rinse it off, to return to something like neutral. This is why the first hour home feels sacred. Why you close the door and stand there for a moment, breathing. Why you might sit in your car in the driveway for 5 extra minutes, not ready yet to carry the outside world across the threshold. You are not stalling. You are transitioning. You are giving yourself permission to let the armor fall, piece by piece, until you are standing in your own skin again. The world does not understand this need. It will call you antisocial for needing recovery time. But you know better. You know that empathy is not infinite. That sensitivity is a gift that requires tending. That the people who feel the most also need to rest the most. Not because they are weak, because they are porous. because they let the world in, and sometimes the world is too much. And home is where they remember how to be a self again instead of a sponge. You are allowed to decompress. You are allowed to need time alone after being with people, even people you love. This is not rejection. This is self-preservation. This is knowing that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and the cup empties faster when you feel everything at full volume. There is no hierarchy here. The person who finds energy in the crowded room is not more evolved than the person who finds it in solitude. The extrovert is not winning. The introvert is not compensating. These are not stages of development. They are orientations. They are the different ways human nervous systems make sense of the world. And both are necessary. Both are whole. Both are enough. The culture has forgotten this. It has treated outward-facing energy as the default and inward-facing energy as something to overcome, to apologize for, to fix with enough exposure therapy and positive thinking. But temperament is not pathology. It is not something you grow out of if you just try hard enough. It is the foundational architecture of how you process reality, and it deserves respect. Think of it this way. Some people are explorers. They move through the world gathering, sampling, connecting dots across wide distances. They need external stimulation to feel alive. They think by speaking. They discover themselves in relationship to others. This is beautiful. This is valuable. The world needs explorers. And some people are translators. They take the raw material of experience and sit with it, turn it over, find the pattern underneath the noise. They need internal space to feel clear. They think by reflecting. They discover themselves in relationship to themselves first, others second. This is also beautiful. This is also valuable. The world needs translators. Both roles are essential. The explorer without the translator is all motion, no meaning. The translator without the explorer is all depth, no data. We need each other, but we do not need to become each other. You are not failing at extroversion. You are succeeding at introspection. You are not broken for needing solitude. You are built for it. Your capacity for depth, for sustained attention, for emotional complexity, these are not consolation prizes. These are your gifts, and they require the very conditions the culture tells you to avoid: quiet, time, space, stillness. Stop apologizing for your design. Stop treating your need for home as a deficiency. You are not less than. You are different, and different is not a problem to solve. It is a truth to honor. Virginia Woolf knew a room of one's own, she said, not as luxury, as necessity, as the non-negotiable condition for thought, for art, for the kind of work that requires you to disappear from the world long enough to hear what wants to come through you. The room was not about walls. It was about protection. It was about carving out a space where the self could unfold without interruption, without performance, without the constant negotiation that comes from being visible. Every creator understands this instinctively. The writer needs silence to hear the sentence forming. The artist needs solitude to see what the hands want to make. The musician needs privacy to follow the melody past the point of polish into the wilderness where the real innovation lives. You cannot make anything true in front of an audience. You cannot risk failure, risk ugliness, risk the vulnerable early drafts when someone is watching. The inner room is where permission lives. Permission to be clumsy, to start over, to follow the thread, even when it leads nowhere. But this is not just for artists. This is for anyone who builds anything. Ideas, insights, solutions, a coherent sense of self. If you are making meaning from experience, you are creating. If you are synthesizing information into understanding, you are creating. If you are constructing a life that reflects your actual values instead of inherited expectations, you are creating. And creation requires retreat. The world wants your output. It wants your productivity, your content, your constant contribution. But it does not want to see the process. It does not want to witness the hours of silence, the false starts, the long stretches where nothing visible is happening, but everything essential is forming. The inner room is where you protect that invisible work, where you honor the fact that gestation takes time, that depth cannot be rushed, that the best of what you have to offer will only come if you give it space to arrive on its own terms. Solitude is not selfish. It is how you become worth knowing. It is how you develop a perspective that is actually yours. Ideas that have been tested against your own experience. A voice that sounds like you instead of the aggregated echo of everyone you've ever tried to please. The room of your own is not where you hide from the world. It is where you prepare to meet it as yourself. There is a version of you that shifts depending on who is in the room, not dishonestly, not manipulatively, but naturally, the way any organism adapts to its environment. With your family, you are one shape. With colleagues, another. With old friends, you slip back into the person you were a decade ago. None of these are false, but none of them are complete. They are facets, performances, the self in relationship to external expectation. In solitude, something different happens. The shape stops shifting. Without an audience to please or a role to fulfill, you settle into something more foundational. The self that exists independent of witness. The preferences that do not require justification. The thoughts that do not need to be translated into acceptable language. This is identity stability, not rigidity. Stability. The capacity to know who you are when no one is telling you who to be. This is how boundaries form, not from anger or defensiveness, but from clarity. When you spend enough time alone, you begin to notice what feels true and what feels adopted. You begin to distinguish between the opinions you actually hold and the opinions you have absorbed from proximity. You start to recognize the difference between connection that nourishes you and connection that depletes you. Between relationships built on depth and relationships built on habit. Solitude builds self-trust. It teaches you that your own company is not something to escape, that your own thoughts are worth following, that your instincts, when given space to emerge without interference, are reliable. And from that, trust comes discernment, not arrogance. Discernment, the capacity to say no without guilt, the willingness to disappoint people rather than abandon yourself, the understanding that not everyone deserves access to you, that intimacy is earned, that your energy is finite and therefore sacred. The person who knows themselves in solitude is harder to manipulate, harder to sway, harder to convince that they should want what everyone else wants, should value what everyone else values, should live a life that looks right from the outside, even if it feels wrong from the inside. This is not isolation. This is integrity, the integration of inner and outer. The refusal to fragment yourself across a dozen versions just to keep the peace. You become selective, not cold, selective. You stop maintaining friendships out of obligation. You stop showing up to events that drain you. You stop pretending that shallow connection is better than no connection. You wait for depth. You wait for the people who can meet you in the quiet, who do not need you to perform, who understand that sometimes love looks like silence and space, and the trust that you will return when you are ready. This is maturity. This is knowing that your presence is a gift, not a given. That you are allowed to choose who receives it. That the life built on your own terms, even if it looks lonely to others, is infinitely more sustainable than the life built on applause. Home is not a place. It is a state. It is the felt sense of coming back to yourself after the world has pulled you in a dozen directions. It is the exhale, the softening, the moment when the performance ends and the real person is allowed to exist again. You have been looking for this your entire life, even when you did not have language for it. The feeling of not having to translate yourself, the relief of being understood without having to explain, the peace that comes from being witnessed as you are, not as you should be. For some, this state is found in relationship, for others, in nature, but for you, it is found most reliably in the literal walls you return to, the physical space you have arranged to reflect your actual nervous system, your actual needs, your actual rhythms. This is not avoidance. This is pilgrimage. Every time you close the door behind you, you are making a choice. You are choosing authenticity over performance. You are choosing regulation over stimulation. You are choosing the slow, steady work of becoming whole over the fast, fragmenting work of being everything to everyone. There is courage in this choice. The world will not celebrate it. The world rewards visibility, productivity, constant motion. It rewards the person who is always available, always on, always saying yes. But you have learned something the world has not. That sustainable presence requires regular absence. That you cannot give what you do not have. That the deepest intimacy requires a self solid enough to offer. And that self is built in solitude, in silence, in the hours no one sees. Home is the temple. Not in the religious sense, though. Perhaps that too. In the sense that it is sacred. In the sense that it is the place where you tend to the parts of yourself that the world does not value but that you cannot live without. The imagination, the sensitivity, the need for beauty, for slowness, for the kind of attention that cannot be monetized or measured or posted. This is the altar. This is where you remember what matters. And here is the paradox. The walls become wings. The more you honor your need for retreat, the more capacity you have for genuine engagement, the more you allow yourself to withdraw, the more you have to offer when you return. You are not shrinking your life. You are deepening it. You are learning to move through the world from a place of fullness instead of depletion, from authenticity instead of adaptation, from choice instead of compulsion. You carry home inside you now. It is no longer just a location. It is a practice, a remembering. Wherever you are, you can return to that inner stillness, that core stability, that quiet knowing. The external home taught you how. It showed you what safety feels like, what peace tastes like, what it means to be undefended. And now you know. Now you can access it anywhere. The room of your own has become the ground you stand on. The work you do in solitude does not stay in solitude. It cannot. The peace you cultivate in the quiet hours, the clarity you find in the stillness, the self you rebuild in the sanctuary, these travel with you. They change the way you show up in the world. Not louder, not more visible, but more present, more rooted, more true. You notice it first in the small moments. The conversation where you do not immediately agree just to keep things smooth. The invitation you decline without the cascade of apologetic explanations. The meeting where you speak less but mean more. Where your words land with weight because they come from center instead of from the frantic need to fill space. You are no longer performing presence. You are offering it. And people feel the difference, even if they cannot name it. This is the gift of stillness. It does not make you smaller. It makes you solid. The hours you spend alone, processing, integrating, tending to your inner world, they are not subtracted from your capacity for connection. They are the foundation of it. You can only meet another person as deeply as you have met yourself. You can only hold space for someone else's complexity to the extent that you have learned to hold your own. The relationships change. They have to. You stop tolerating surface-level exchange. You stop pretending that being agreeable is the same as being connected. You become willing to risk awkwardness, silence, even distance in service of something real. And some people will fall away. The ones who needed you pliable, who needed you to mirror them, who needed your energy more than they needed you. Let them go. You are not for everyone anymore. You are for the ones who can meet you in the depth, who understand that true intimacy requires two whole people, not two halves desperately trying to complete each other. You bring calm into chaos now, not because you are unaffected by it, but because you have learned to regulate yourself first. You have practiced returning to center so many times in the privacy of your home that you can do it now in public, in real time, in the middle of the storm. This is not detachment. This is mastery, the ability to feel everything and not be consumed by it. The ability to be with intensity without becoming it. The world needs this. It needs people who have done the inner work, who have sat with their own shadows long enough to stop projecting them onto everyone else. It needs people who can hold space without collapsing, who can listen without fixing, who can be present without agenda. You cannot learn this in the noise. You learn it in the silence. And then you carry it back out, a gift you did not know you were preparing. This is integration, the inside becoming the outside, the home you built within becoming the home you offer to others. Not by inviting everyone in, but by being so firmly rooted in your own ground that people feel safe in your presence. They do not know why. They just know that near you, they can breathe a little deeper. That near you, they are allowed to be human. That near you, the performance can stop for a moment. You have not abandoned the world by choosing solitude. You have prepared yourself to meet it honestly. You have not rejected connection by needing space. You have learned what real connection requires. You have not wasted your time in the quiet. You have been building something that does not show up on a resume or a highlight reel, but that matters more than both. A self. A real, coherent, undivided self. And now, you carry it with you. Now, the sanctuary is portable. The peace is internalized. The home is not a place you retreat to. It is a frequency you return to. again and again, no matter where you stand. So if you're listening to this from your quiet room, know this: you are not missing anything. You are not falling behind. You are not less alive because you choose stillness over spectacle, depth over display, the inner work over the outer performance. You are doing something harder. You are doing something rarer. You are refusing to fragment yourself across a dozen stages just to prove you exist. You are building a life from the inside out, brick by quiet brick, and that kind of architecture takes time. It takes solitude. It takes the courage to close the door when everyone else is telling you to fling it open. Do not apologize for this. Do not soften it or justify it or dress it up in language that makes other people comfortable. Your need for home is not a phase you will outgrow. It is not a wound that will heal if you just push through it. It is your design. It is the way your particular nervous system makes sense of a world that is too much, too fast, too loud for the kind of attention you were built to give. The sensitive ones, the deep processors, the ones who feel at high volume. You are not broken. You are tuned differently, and the world needs what you hear in the quiet. It needs the insights that only come from sustained reflection. It needs the art that only emerges in solitude. It needs the calm you carry after you have spent time remembering who you are underneath all the roles and expectations and performances. Home is not where you hide. Home is where you return to yourself, to your breath, to the frequency that is yours and yours alone. And every time you honor that return, you are practicing something revolutionary. The belief that your inner life matters as much as your outer one. That peace is not laziness. That rest is not weakness. That choosing yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. So light the candle, make the tea, close the door. Let the world spin without you for a while. You will return to it when you are ready, when you are whole, when you have something real to offer instead of something expected. And when you do return, you will bring the quiet with you. You will bring the depth. You will bring the presence that can only come from a person who knows how to be alone without being lonely, who knows how to be still without being stuck, who knows that the richest life is not the one that looks full from the outside, but the one that feels true from the inside. This is your permission. This is your absolution. This is the benediction you have been waiting for. You are allowed to prefer home. You are allowed to need solitude. You are allowed to build a life that honors your actual rhythm instead of the rhythm the culture insists is normal. You are allowed to stay. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the clock, the particular quality of light through your window, the way your breath sounds when no one else is listening. This is not emptiness. This is sanctuary. This is the sound of a life being lived on purpose, in alignment, in peace. Welcome home.